Hey, what is up guys? Jonathan back, and today we're going to cover how to create object-based tileable textures with alpha maps inside Substance Painter. Now I know your first thought is like, well, why don't you just use Substance Designer, right? It's what the program's for, is just straight up creating tileable textures. And yeah, I couldn't agree more, totally right. But this is also mainly focused at some workarounds. If you're not well versed in Designer, there's still a learning curve for people just getting into it. And so if you're already well versed in Painter, this is a good kind of workflow. So the focus is going to be creating alpha maps in 3ds Max and then bringing that stuff into Painter and just getting some quick results. So what would be a use case for this? Use case would be something like what we're going to do today, which would be like balcony railings. So this is perfect for like low poly stuff in the distance, or again, anything where you're just going to use an opacity map and you're going super low poly. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this stuff, we're going to make a plane, and we're going to essentially create some balcony rail via planes. So, and create some tileables. They're going to work very nice for us. So let's get started. Now I had already I'll be real, I kind of went through this video a couple times, and I went through the modeling, and I have this stuff modeled out already, and I found that being kind of off topic. So what I really want this video to focus on is the technical workflows of making alpha maps inside Substance Painter, and also getting alpha maps out of 3ds Max, so we don't have to hand paint masks in Painter. Like, that's just a pain, and I'll cover why, again, why this is good, and where we're saving time, how we're saving time, etc. So first off, yeah, we would create a plane, which we already did here. So we have a plane, and I have the geometry already created, so I'm going to unhide that. You see here I have just I'll show you what I got here. Again, I had made a video and I went through modeling it, and again, it wasn't the focus. It took up a little bit too much time, so I wanted to shrink this baby down and just get to the nuggets, right? We like the nuggets. That sounds horrible. So so here we go. We got a nice fence, and again, you want to model it as you would model it normally. So don't feel like you got to model it flat, a little, like the plane, and just get some cutouts. That's not what you want, because we're still going to rely on the ambient occlusion bakes, the normal bakes, the height that comes from that, the nice curvatures. So again, that's too why we also made a high poly. We subdivided it, so we have some extra edges here. That way we get that nice shading, that nice corner shading, so everything doesn't feel so blocky and Lego-y, All right, so let's unhide this. And since we already have this built, we can go right to getting this stuff ready for Substance Painter and then baking on our alpha map. So first thing to do is we got to name our stuff. So I went balcony low poly. My suffixes, I like to go _LP _high P. So I named the high poly object here the same, balcony with the _high poly suffix. We'll start there, so that's good. Another one too, we want our material ready to go for, actually we'll pause on that. What we first need to do is create our alpha map. So what we do is, let me erase this stuff here. We're going to create a texture or a material for the balcony rails here. So we create a standard material. Again, guys, make sure your default renderer too is set to scanline. If you're using the new versions of Max, it's going to default to the Arnold renderer most likely. So again, make sure you go to your render setup, change the scanline. That way we can work with the render to texture options. So that's all set. We have access to the scanline standard material. We drop that baby in, and we're going to go to the diffuse color and make it all the way white. We'll close that baby down for now. And now we're going to go and select the plane, and we're going to hit 0 for render to texture, or you can find it under rendering, render to texture. And we have our low poly plane selected. We have that enabled. So what we want to do usually by default, this is probably unselected. So actually, before I get to that, we need to make sure it's unwrapped. I'm pretty sure by default planes have a 1-to-1 unwrap, but we still establish it, make it yourself. So we apply a UVW map modifier. We deselect real world map size, so it's going to be a nice 1-to-1 square, tileable square. Perfect. And now let's go back to projection mapping. Let's turn this on. We're going to pick our high poly balcony. And this is key right here. Now we're going to go to options. This is very important. We're going to go to options and make sure our Ramus color, mine's already set to black, but usually it defaults to red. So we want black. We want black. Again, we're baking an alpha map. So we want the white to be visible, which is the rail, and black, which is the background stuff to cut out. So very straightforward. Mapping coordinates, we want to use the existing channel, the UVW map modifier we just applied. Sub objects doesn't matter. We're not using those UVs. So what we're going to do, and I already had it rocking, we're going to add a diffuse map. Stretch this out for you. And we're going to go 1K. 1K is fine for this demo. We're not going to go too crazy with 4K stuff. Just make it quick. So that's all set. We should be good to go. So we're going to hit render here. Overwrite this stuff. And here we go. So we get a nice alpha map. And now, this is good stuff to you'll run into sometimes. And I haven't really dived deep enough to correct this issue why I'm getting why it's baking in shadows, which is really no problem. We're just going to use Photoshop as a middleman program, and we're just going to whiten that out. So that's fine. We're going to, when we run into these errors, you find solutions on the fly. If you don't know the base way to keep it correct, which I do not yet know. So we're going to call this balcony alpha. Make it a JPEG. You don't want to make it a PNG because you want that black to show up in your image. You don't want it to be transparent. We're going to make it a JPEG. I'm going to say OK. Excuse me. Next step, we're going to bring this into Photoshop. Balcony alpha. There we go. All right, now, yeah, it's like a bummer we got the shadows, but it's a super simple fix, right? We're just going to select that white. We're going to paint that out. Took 2 seconds, and we're going to resave this file. We're going to overwrite this balcony alpha. Get out of Photoshop. All right, our next step here is we can collapse all this stuff. Close render to texture. Now we're going to apply a material to our low poly object. Key is always naming our material. We're going to call it balcony. Color and everything else does not matter, so we're going to apply that. Now let's export our objects here. Now my process that I like to do is I like my FBXs to my low polys to be an FBX, and I like my high poly to be an OBJ. Just a personal preference, guys. Use whatever file types you like to work with. Just what kind of stuck for me. So we're going to call this balcony low poly. Doesn't really need the low poly suffix for this, but it's fine. And we're going to now export our high poly mesh. So again, I like to do an OBJ. I'm going to switch over to OBJ. I already have this stuff sitting on the desktop, so we're going to overwrite it. And now this, I do like to, we should have that named high poly. And we're good to go. Export that out. Done. Now we are ready for Substance Painter. We're going to open up a new project and start a new file here. Now this is key, guys. You want your template to be PBR metallic roughness with the alpha blend. Very critical. If you don't have that selected, you can always add the opacity channel in your texture set settings, but why do extra work when a template's ready there for you? So let's click compute tangent space per fragment, and let's select our low poly balcony. So we should be good to go. Let's import that in. Zoom in here, and we have our low poly mesh. Very simple. We just have a plane. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to our texture set settings, and we need to bake our maps. We're going to go to bake mesh maps. And there's a couple critical options here. Now what we don't want is dilation width to be high. We want this down to 1 because what happens is we start to get all big fat Albert on it. You remember Big Albert from the Cosby Show? Probably showing my age. But we're going to get real puffy results. The balcony row is going to puff out and look like the Pillsbury Doughboy, and we're just going to get some kind of shoddy results. So we're going to avoid that, and to avoid that, we go dilation width all the way down to 1. Diffusion really doesn't matter for this, so we're going to just skip that. And I think by default, this is usually checked. Checked or unchecked, it really doesn't matter. Because we're going to cut it out with our alpha map anyway, and what that really does, it applies just a cutout in the background. So now this is critical. We're now working with our bake cage, and I have found 0.2 to be really good. But if you notice like you're not getting good bake results, like it's not capturing your entire mesh, you want to play with these settings. So you want to adjust most likely it's going to be your max frontal distance, and you would want to increase it if things aren't totally being captured. I'm going to go back to 2.2. I found that to work for this stuff, 0.2. So now we're going to bring in our high poly mesh, and that's really it. Now another one too is, say you're doing something with text or screws, some of that stuff might be skewed. You might get some weird normal bakes. So if that's happening, you're going to want to uncheck your average normals. For what we have right now, it's going to be fine, so I'm going to leave it checked. We're going to increase our anti-aliasing to 8x8. We're going to bring our match to mesh name. And we have our suffixes already in place, which is going to be underscore low poly, underscore high poly, just as we named it in 3ds Max. Next step is we're going to go to, now material IDs don't matter. And again, that's why we baked out the alpha map, because we don't have material IDs, right? We have one object, and that's the plane. So our mask we'd have to hand paint. So again, this option is irrelevant. So we're going to go to ambient occlusion. We're going to self-occlusion by mesh name. Again, I don't know how much this matters for what we're doing with planes. It's not like we're working with a complex mesh with tons of different objects, separate objects. So I think always would probably still work, but it's always a good habit to, go only same mesh name. We should be good. Our settings look great. Let's do a quick bake. And yeah, it looks like we're getting good results. Yeah, there we go. So you can kind of see we got a nice, pretty good bake here. And again, this is 1K. If we were 4K, we wouldn't get some of this kind of stretching, but that's fine. It'll cut out with the map, with the alpha map. But you can see some good stuff here. So we have like a rounded top rail. Again, that's why you want to model it as you would see it. So let me isolate that quick. So again, you want your geometry to be as you would normally model it. So again, I skinnied this stuff up and I skinnied that up. So we're getting good shadows baked in. And you can see that now in the mesh, you get a good shadow there, some shadows here, shadows under the rail. And it's really good stuff. So again, we're baking objects into a plane. So at the end of the day, it's still going to look kind of flat because it's super high poly. It's just a plane. It's not like we're going to be utilizing parallax occlusion and really like displacing the stuff out like crazy as you would in Designer. Again, this is good for like low poly stuff, really background stuff, and just kind of working with alphas in Substance Painter. So kind of ranting. So we're going to just go to import resources here, and we're going to add our alpha image. So we're going to go to the balcony alpha we created and manipulate it in Photoshop. And I'm going to bring that into my texture folder. We're going to go to project and import that. And there it is right there. So now what I was getting at with, let's apply quick material here before we get going. So we're going to go steel painted. That'll work fine for us. And again, so like now, so we had this, and that's why we made the alpha map, because if we go mask with color selection, we only have one color, right? We only have the plane, so totally useless. And what we'd have to do normally is go black mask, and you'd have to paint this stuff in. So you'd have to, hand paint this stuff, and you'd be like, okay, hand paint your mask and get your stuff in there. And you can see how, that's going to take a little bit of time, right? And it's just kind of pointless. So we kind of took the technical approach in Max, and then we also get perfectly accurate results. Where when you hand paint things, you're probably going to be a little sloppy, and it's not going to be 100% perfect. Another thing is probably like, well, why don't you use the polygon select tool? But again, we only have one polygon, right? We only have the plane. So we got to get out of that mode. And so we're going to delete this. And what we don't want to do too is you don't want to go bitmap mask on your material here. I found that doesn't work with our alpha map. So let me go to, actually I think I had it selected there. I was trying to select it. There we go. So when we do that, it's like, oh yeah, it works, right? It's kind of cutting it out, but it's not cutting it out. We're still getting that gray background. I'm not entirely sure why that is. So that's not the route we want to go. What we want to do is we want to completely overwrite it. So we're going to add a new fill layer right on top of our steel. And we're going to uncheck every channel minus the alpha channel. And we're going to go to our texture folder. We're going to drag and drop that alpha map in. And boom, there we go, guys. So we got a nice alpha map here, cutting out, looking good. And not a bad result, for just some quick work, some quick stuff. And let's check it out in our iRay renderer real quick. We'll get out of the prairie here and change our panorama. And let's I'm feeling like I want to go to the beach. Got some sun today, feeling good. I don't want winter. There we go. All right, so we're down by the beach. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, right, it's still gonna look a little flat because it is just a plane, right? But we're getting pretty, we're getting still some decent results here. We're getting some normals. We're gonna get some AOs. We're gonna kind some of that stuff's gonna pop, and not bad for like long distance low poly stuff that you're not gonna get too close to. So again, just good workflow, good workaround in Substance Painter. And what I'm gonna do real quick is I'm going to export this stuff out, bring it into Max, and then we'll wrap up the video. So we're gonna go to Export Textures. I have a custom template made, very custom, and I have my opacity built in. Really what I'm looking for is just the opacity and the diffuse for right now, just for this demo. So we're going to export it. Actually, we're going to go to Desktop, select folder there. We're going to export it. Cool beans. Let's save our settings for giggles. Let's go back to 3ds Max now. We'll hide this. We'll go to our plane. Now let's create a material. We'll create a fresh one. Let's bring in our maps here. So what we really want only is the opacity and the diffuse. I could bring in the normals and stuff, but we're just gonna make something very simple for right now, just to show you that it worked and what we're kind of looking at in 3ds Max here. So we apply it. We went diffuse and diffuse, opacity and opacity. Make sure you select show shaded in material viewport, otherwise you're not going to see it. And let's check it out. So yeah, not bad results, guys. You know, again, we're in the viewport, so it's not like we're in the IRE renderer, and not all of our maps are applied. So this is dope, right? Pretty successful. And let's tile this stuff out and see what it looks like. So we'll do a few tiles, and there we go. We're getting some railing, right? Not bad. You know, we can even you know, do our side here. And there we go. All right, I'm kind of dinking around at this point. You guys get it. You see the workflow. It's very cool. Again, you know, still get into Designer. I'm starting to get into it. Very cool program. But again, there's a learning curve. So if you're looking for quick results, as I was on a project, and I just needed to produce something, and I knew Painter already, I found this workflow to be really good. And these are still good things to know. Baking out of 3ds Max with the projection, render to texture option, and then also working with alphas in Substance Painter. Still very critical stuff to know. I find it useful, and just another tool in the tool belt. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Stay fresh, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.